Hello, my name is Ian Gray. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our regional rail freight system. I'll be looking particularly at New South Wales, but the issues that I'll be discussing, the issues that I'll be illustrating for you, really can be applied anywhere. In particular, I'm concerned that we underutilise our regional railway system. We could make a lot more use of it than we do now. Through the course of this video, I'll be looking at some places, particularly in North America, where they have found ways to make much more use of their system. And in doing so, they've benefited the whole transport system as well as regional industry. And that's a particular interest of mine, the ways in which relatively small railways can bring great benefits to local industry. We'll start by looking at a little bit of Australian history, but I don't want you to feel trapped by that history. There's a lot happened to change our railways in Australia, and there's a lot more that could happen too. Probably our most famous legacy of our railway history is the difference in gauges. But now, when we look at Albury, we see part of the national standard gauge network. The broad gauge track on the right is no longer used, and the freight train on the left goes straight through. And of course our trains are different now. This old wagon could carry 15 tonnes. This one carries 60, and a really modern one carries 100 or more tonnes. From a regional point of view though, the most important feature of the history of New South Wales railways has been the degree of its centralisation on Sydney. If we go to Sydney Central Station, we can find a memorial to the great engineer John Whitten. And at that memorial there is a map. This map shows what I mean. Right throughout the history of New South Wales railways really, the system has been administered from Sydney. For a while also from Newcastle, but basically from Sydney. There were good reasons for this, of course. The New South Wales government built an extensive system of branch lines well into inland New South Wales. Many of these lines are no longer used. They now all seem to have become known as the grain lines. And this is a little unfortunate because they can and do carry more freight, other types of freight, than just grain. There are some other common misconceptions about the way our regional freight system works now. Another common misconception is that all of our freight trains carry just one type of cargo or one commodity each over a long distance going just from A to B. There are still trains, despite the changes that have happened since the early 1990s and through privatisation, there are still trains which carry a variety of cargo, and there are still trains which pick up freight along their route. In fact, some of these practices have actually grown more common in recent times, and there are regional examples. As McCulloch argues in this paper, published by the US Transport Research Board, the aim of railway policy should be to use railways to increase the overall efficiency of transport systems. Other common misconceptions about railways surround the matter of costs. Transport in general is an expensive business, and transport infrastructure can be very expensive. But expensive in relation to what? With regard to the cost of freight, we know from this report by CRA International that the dollar cost of operating an equivalent service by train can be half that of operating a truck over the same route. there is other analysis which supports that conclusion. Comparing the infrastructure costs of road and rail is also a complex matter. It has been attempted by the Australasian Railway Association, and as you can see here, they came to the conclusion the construction cost of rail is just a bit more than half the construction cost of road in the context of a hypothetical bridge. They certainly make the point that rail infrastructure is more cost effective. The relatively high cost of road maintenance is certainly well known. The Ministerial Task Force into the reinstatement of the Blaney to Mondrel line found that the return of rail service on that line would save somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million per year in road maintenance costs. And the line could become self-supporting over time. The infrastructure cost issue is also illustrated by the conclusions of two government inquiries in recent years. One was a New South Wales Grains Industry Advisory Committee report, and the other was a joint Commonwealth State report. Both of those inquiries recommended subsidising many lines, a big majority of lines, to keep them open, rather than paying additional money in order to maintain and upgrade the roads as necessary for the grain traffic. When we look at external costs, the ones that aren't so readily taken account of in regular business transactions, we see rail having a significant advantage. These are costs associated with environmental pollution, social issues, and safety. I would like to mention another common misconception about rail freight. That is the view that freight trains have to operate over very long distances, like perhaps 400 or 500 kilometres, to be economically viable. Now, this isn't the case, and in fact, there are two instances in New South Wales which I'd like to show you which contradict this view. Basically, where trains can be loaded directly, that is, there's no need for road freight to get the material to or away from the train, the distances can be very, very short indeed. What really matters for the viability of a railway is the density of traffic that uses it. That means the number of trains that pass over that length of line. The mainline railways of North America are often very heavily trafficked. There are lots of trains running over them. In this instance, we saw 3 trains pass over these bridges in just 20 minutes. This being on the main line through the Fraser Canyon in British Columbia in Canada. The main difference between North American and Australian freight railways is not the immense volume of freight on their main lines, but rather the existence of a viable and proven branch line system in Canada and the USA. This is generally known as the short lines, not because they are necessarily short, although many are, but because they began as small independent operations. Now they, with the larger regional lines, feed into the Class 1 mainline system. The short line network grew rapidly after deregulation in 1980. The big Class 1s were then able to divest themselves of branch lines, which they were no longer interested in because they found them in themselves to be unprofitable. However, many were taken up by smaller operators, and they've done very well. There are now 550 operating in the USA. They contribute around 25% of the Class 1's mainline freight. Some of them, by the way, are state-owned. While some groups of short lines are owned by holding companies, the most interesting feature of this system for us is their local administration. Very many are managed from small regional communities to serve local industries and their customers. They often have a strong community focus. Many, including Oregon Pacific, which operates 2 short branches, are last mile railways. They move freight off the main lines over fairly short distances, right from the origin or to the destination of freight. They eliminate the need for costly pickup and delivery of freight to the railway. Oregon Pacific serves an industrial park where industry can take advantage of direct rail connection. The American system is able to move freight by rail in relatively small volumes. Australian railways came to focus more heavily on full train loads, but that might now be changing. The key to this is the agglomeration of lots of small loads into long train loads. Short lines have become very important to the survival and prosperity of local industry. Certainly, short line success stories far outweigh failures. The number of short lines continues to grow. The Canadian province of Saskatchewan offers some comparisons to New South Wales, as it has a large grain industry plus a range of other actual and potential railway customers. As we can see here on Saskatchewan's Great Sandhills Railway, the short lines often own or hire locomotives previously used by the Class 1s. These railways can be significant rail operations and very significant local industry in themselves. For example, Great Sandhills employs around 30 people, which in the small town of Leader, population around 900, is very significant. The railway is also managed locally. See that fertiliser plant beside the track on the left? Well, it's an industry which was attracted to Leader by the presence of Great Sandhills Railway, offering direct access to the national rail freight system. As has been explained to us by the Director of Rail Services for the Saskatchewan Government, Saskatchewan actively supports local administration and local railways which will serve local industry. In North America, there is recognition of the mutual interest between local railways, local industry, and local industry's customers. All this has had results. Ed Zomber again. From a railway operating perspective, what local management has been able to do is build traffic density on both the short line and the main line that is fed by the short line. If we look at the short line system and ask ourselves how we might adapt the model to suit Australia, the first thing we should look at is the way this mutual relationship between railway and industries has been developed through local management. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope that there's been some information in here that's of interest to you, and I hope that we can get to work now and looking at our railways differently, perhaps make some progress. I don't think we're going to reach the kind of system, that 25% figure of the contribution of branch lines to main lines in North America. I don't think we're going to reach that anytime soon, but there's still lots that we can do. Thank you.